Awesome. Very good evening. Thanks, JP and the rest of the team and everyone joining me from TriOS College. So as mentioned by JP, what I'll try and do is maybe just kind of give you, I would say, a bit of a glimpse of uLawPractice, who we are, what we do, the main components of the product, and maybe take a use case of a small claims matter or a landlord and tenant board matter, and kind of just walk you through the whole 9 yards of how you create a client, create a matter, retainer, and all the good stuff. Take it up to where we also provide you the opportunity to generate Law Society compliance documents and court forms automation. Okay? So we're a Canadian company. We're based out of Ottawa, and we've been in business for 13 years. We're legal accounting, practice management, as well as a full-fledged business accounting software. So as a legal professional who's just getting started with a new business, what we want to empower you with is a single product and a platform that pretty much covers all the important components that you need for your legal business. Okay? So that's our strength, and that's what we've been doing very well for the last 12 to 13 years. Now, the crux of the product is really when you get started off with our contacts. This is where you're bringing in your client information. So let's say you have a prospective client who's given you a call, who's interested in working with you. Actually, I can do that. So I have muted everyone else, so please do use the chat window at any time to ask any questions that you may have, and I will be more than happy to answer. Okay? So as I mentioned, we start out with our workflow with the client intake. So really the first step, if you will, is being able to add a new client. So let's say I say add to new clients, a simple, very simple client intake form. Okay? And let's say I'm going to say Addie Smith, and I'll give him a nickname. A simple form that's basically where you're capturing whatever information you have about your client at that particular time. Of course, we encourage all our clients to ask their clients, how did they get to know about them to begin with, right? How did you get to know me, Roger Moore, the legal professional? And let's say it was a referral, or it could have been a walk-in, it could have been a Facebook advertisement, or just word of mouth. You can enter what that information is. Of course, the Law Society wants you to capture a correspondence address. So you can put that in. And in uLaw, we ask you to mark one of the addresses as the mailing address. In fact, it's a part of what the Law Society wants you to capture too. But what we do is we take that mailing address and we use it not only as your correspondence address, but we also use that same information to auto-populate court forms as you feel fit. Okay? We have our own Ulaw App on our Android as well as iOS stores. So you can download that, enter the same login information as you would for a full-fledged web. And there are certain important components that you can do. Not all of them what you see in the web, but some of them, a good subset of those features are in your mobile app as well. So for example, you can do client intake right on your mobile app. You can dial a client right out of the uLaw phone and would prompt you to docket that phone conversation if that's prudent. So there's some cool features you can do right out of the phone. You can add a docket, etc. So I'm just going to go ahead and click the Save button here in uLaw. Okay, I don't quite hear the echo, but I'll try and keep it slow. So I go ahead and click on the Save button, and it's going to bring up Mr. Addie's information. Okay? And one of the first steps that you would do before you move forward with creating a matter is, as what the Law Society requests you to do, is actually create or conduct what they call as a conflict search. This is to make sure that you are completely aware if there are any conflicts in representing this client. Have you come across this name or this individual in any of your previous matters, or or could have been any other engagements within other files too? As a learning curve within the product, we have primarily 2 buttons that we like for you to make that part of your learning curve. One is what we call as the action button, and we have another button called the document generation. If you click on the action and if you do a conflict check, you can check if you've created any matters or even come across a person by the name Adira in your events. And you can uncheck a company employment screening and you do conflict check. Because of the power of the cloud, what we allow you to do is it runs behind the scene where it's generating a document, it's scanning the entire database, and it's trying to come up with any instance of an Adira or a Smith that uLaw may have already encountered as part of your data entry. As that runs behind the scene, I'll draw your attention to document generation, which is the next big button within the screen. And you're going to see these 2 buttons repeat across all the screens in uLaw. And what you have here are very simple, pragmatic tools, so you can generate an envelope or an envelope that tells you the different sizes, and it has pre-populated the name and the address. You can leave your envelope on top of your printer and emboss this. It would print right on top of it, right? You can do that. You can do labels. You can include the phone number. And we are compliant with the Avery label. And you can print this against your label printer. And just say print. Tell how many other copies you want. Point it to the appropriate printer. Okay? There you go. I pressed the wrong button. And that's how it looks like. And here is the conflict search result. And as you can see, there's quite a few Smiths in our database. There's an Olivia Smith, a Don Smith, a Smithsonian. Most of them are last name conflicts. So there's really no Adira or ADHIR ever. And we also, as per the Law Society's guideline, date stamp this particular document so that you as a legal professional can then store this document, make your decision based on the information presented. Of course, we leave you to make your own decision, an informed decision at that. But we support you with the document with the date. So you can always tell your Law Society auditor that as of 15th of July, that's the information I have. Okay? Another important document that we have is what we call as the source of contact report. So you can generate this for the month, you can generate this for a date range. What this really is it gives you a great handle on the different sources from which you're generating your clients. So if you remember, we did the word of mouth. We entered that as part of the client intake process. So what we do at uLaw is we capture all of that information, store it in our database, and give it to you in this pie chart as well as tabular format, where you know that for this month of July, you've got 5 referrals, 2 from family, 2 have not been categorized. There's 1 word of mouth, which is what we did today, and a few others. Now, for those that have not been categorized, we go one step further, and we even tell you who those individuals are. So for Tyler, you don't have yet the source of contact. So maybe if Tyler gives you a call or you give Tyler a call, you can search up that contact information at any time within uLaw. I used to search right here, Tyler. You can go ahead and click edit right away. And let's say he said word of mouth as well. You can go ahead and add that and click save. Okay, so of course, when you rerun this report, you would see the word of mouth go up by another point, and your not categorized will go down by another point. Okay, so fairly simple. Add the client, and you can always go back to our dashboard, and it also always has the recently modified contacts. You can just click on Adira at the right. So we did the client intake. right? We did the generation of the conflict document by clicking on the action button. We did the source of contact report. We also looked at a few other documents that you can generate right for this client. You can always edit this client at any time and add any further information that you may have. You could say referred by Tom. If you have a website, you can add that. So I will pause right here to ask if you have any questions with everything that I've shown you the last 5 minutes with regards to client intake, conflict search, and just getting familiar with the documents that you can generate for a client before we move on to creating a matter. So let me just take a quick pause. I'll take any questions that you may have. Please use the chat window to ask me your questions. Or if you'd like me to move forward, just go ahead and type in move forward and I'll get going with the matter. Okay. All right, I've got the go ahead signal. So the next step really is to go ahead and create a file. So for that, I'll click on the matter button, and this would open up a brand new matter page for Adira, who's the new client. This is probably the most used screen in uLaw, right? Because this is where you're making your money. This is where our clients are spending the time to enter all the information about that file so that they can accept retainers, or at least they can tell us that they have, and really reflect upon what's really happening with this file as and when it happens. To get started, to create a file and a file number, there's two pieces of information we ask you for. One is an area of practice. Just like the source of contact where we ask you, where did you get this client from? Where did this referral come from? Similarly, we're asking, what type of a matter is this? So if we're just getting started, you may, as a legal professional, decide to work on some specific areas of practice, right? So you may have decided to do small claims and POA, LATB, and you can decide what areas of practice you can work on, and this list is configurable. So uLaw allows you to configure it, and a matter title. So you could say this is Adira, this is John. Okay, John, let's assume Adira is the plaintiff, and John is the defendant, and assume that you, Roger Moore, are representing the plaintiff here. I go ahead and click Save. When I do, you're going to notice that uLaw generates a file number. It takes the client's first name, first alphabet, last name, first alphabet, and randomizes a number based on today's date and hashtags it. And the reason why we do that is so that to keep in compliance with the Law Society's bookkeeping guidelines, that each of the file numbers are configurable as well as cross-indexed. So the next time you run a conflict search on another person by the name Adira, you would right away know that you've created a matter under the same name, just like how we did it for the Smiths. All right, so that's as easy as to create a file within uLaw. And this is where it gets interesting. And if you notice the familiar buttons of action and document generation, they're pretty much placed around the same place and the same color. You have the action in green and the document generation on the top right. Okay, just like how you had contacts, you had action in green, document generation on the top right. That's pretty much the general scheme of things, right? Even if I go into accounts, you're going to see the action button in green, and you're going to see document generation on the right. And then you may be wondering, what are these buttons? These are just a subset or the most commonly used buttons or functions that our clients use on a day-to-day basis. So for example, within accounting, you may not be generating trust balances on a regular basis, right? So that's written here. But you may be generating let's say, or entering expenses on a more regular basis. Or you may be printing checks on a more regular basis, so you can do that right away. Likewise, in Matters, you have what we call as hotkeys. You're probably going to be invoicing quite often and using that function quite often. So as much as the invoice option is available under document generation, we've just taken that as a subset and added it here as well. It's the same set of options, right? The same 4 options, but it's easier for you to navigate. All right. Now let me get first started, or maybe I'll pause and ask the teachers here or the staff, do you teach retainers and trust account? Would you like me to use that as an example, or would you like me to just use a example where we're just doing the work and accepting client payments? Perfect. I'll go ahead with the retainer. So let's say, you're getting started off and then you accept a retainer. First step would, of course, be signing up a retainer agreement. uLaw, under its documents, gives you a few starting points, especially if you're just getting started off as a new professional. There's quite a few templates that you can already get started to repurpose. Of course, if you've reached out to your seniors in the industry and you've already got their templates, that's great. But if you don't, then we give you a starting point. So if you look at the retainer letter samples, we have, to begin with, a simple, elaborate, and a flat rate. Okay? Under document generation, I clicked on retainer letter. If those 3 samples don't work for you, then you can look at other samples. You can choose letters, and then you have hourly, contingency, and we have very specific templatization for POA as well. Okay? So let me start off with maybe doing a retainer letter, and I'll do an elaborate. And you can type in whatever is the amount that you plan to ask as a retainer. So let's say small claims, just for purposes of today's demo, I'll consider a flat rate for about $500 plus tax, or maybe we could say $1,000 plus tax, and maybe there's about $200 of disbursements, right? Like an application fee and a court fee. So I would say $1,000 plus taxes in Ontario, $1,130. So I'll say $1,330. And you can also generate these retainer letters in MS Word, which is a very cool feature in uLaw, because now you can tweak that document, right? So we give you a starting point, but you can always tweak it. If you want to tweak a PDF, then of course you would need a PDF Acrobat or something like that to be able to edit a PDF document. And there you go. No rocket science, but a big time saver at it. Because what we've done is we've, of course, given you a sample. You can always add more to it. You can bulletize it, bold it. It has all your information. It's dated. It has the client's information with their mailing address. It has the file name and a file number. And if you look at the template itself, you can see it's got the description of services. You can tweak this, you can edit this. You've asked us and we've agreed to act for you in this matter. You can see now you've got your fee structure going. So you could have the hourly rates scheduled. So this number of 150 is not random. It comes from your settings. It automatically calculates it from there. Okay? If you come further down, you clearly see retainer. It says, before we begin work on your behalf, we require a retainer in the amount of $1,330. That's the amount we put in that little box. The retainer will be placed in our trust account and will serve as a source of payment for all our part of our services rendered. Okay? Some basic information. You can sign this. You can have your client sign it. And you can even leave a little, if you're emailing this, you can even leave a little link for your client to review this and pretty much click on a link and pay for that retainer using a credit card. Okay, there you go. They can pay for it right from there and gets automatically served up. Of course, that's not a uLaw feature, but we integrate with third-party payment gateways. So right under settings, if you go under accounts, today uLaw integrates with some of the leading Canadian companies. Pivotal Payments, or otherwise called as Newway. You've got Monaris, you've got TD, and of course the more recent one is Global Payments. All these providers, of course, they charge you in varying different percentages from 3%, 3.2, but the important thing to note is all these vendors are trust compliant, which means if let's say it's $1,330 and they charge you maybe 3%, so taking that $40 or something around that, 39 something, that's taken out of your general account. Okay? They leave the trust untouched, keeping you trust compliant. They deposit the entire $1,330 into your trust and take the 3% off your general account. And they do that by, of course, working with you to connect the general and trust to the real bank accounts that you may have. Okay, so I won't segue too much. We'll talk about that later if you need to. So let's assume this client just emailed, transferred you $1,330 or just gave you a check. As and when that happens, whatever transactions occur in real life with pertaining to a file, your responsibility is really to report that back to a bookkeeping system, whatever system that may be. And in uLaw, we make it very easy for you to do that. You can either learn the product with its English labels. So it says retainer, so of course it may have to do something with the retainer. So there it is. It says new retainer. It's only about 5 buttons. Quickly scan through it, click on it, and it gives you the screen. Some of our clients are savvy with financial acumen. So if you know that the money is going into your trust account, you can click on trust. And there's only 2 things you can do with any account. You can either put money into it or take money out. In the case of a retainer, it's deposit into trust. You click on it here. It's the same screen, but it just gives you, the user, different perspectives to learn and adapt the product based on your need. Okay? Most of our clients just go with the English label. They go into retainer, hit new retainer, and let's put that $1,330. And you can always backdate this if you're catching up. And I can say earlier last week, I got this $1,330. It was through a check. It could have been through a transaction that directly touches your bank account, or you may have reached it or got it as a cash. As you know, Law Society allows you to capture up to $7,500 in cash for retainers, so you can always get that in cash. But we prefer that you ask for any specific electronic or any means that can be easily tracked. So even if it's for a couple of $100, I know it's a bit of a pain. We cover it all, but just letting you know that we recommend, especially if it's a bit slightly bigger amount, to have a check or an e-transfer for the audit trail. So let's say the client gave you a check number 5678. We then allow you to deposit right into the trust account. This is a playground account, and you can see that our clients have built several playground accounts, but I'm going to say it's going into my pool trust account, which is the TD Bank ending with the account number 123. And I'll give Mr. Smith a receipt, which is very important, and I hit the button apply. What this is going to do is apply that $1,330 into this retainer bucket or our trust bucket, and you can see that as the projected balance here. And here is the retainer receipt copy. You can use our default theme or hot blue, swift blue, and backdate this to the 6th and hit download. One other learning curve in uLaw is anytime you generate a document, it's pretty much a download from our servers to your local machine. But once you do have it in your local machine, because we really want to give you the flexibility of where you want to store it, the quick question is, can we store it? Absolutely yes. We integrate with third-party document storage systems. In this case, I'm connected with, let's say, Google Drive. Each file has a Documents tab. And you can choose whether you're connecting with Google Drive or OneDrive, right? And I hit refresh. And what this essentially does, uLaw behind the scene creates a folder under my Google Drive account with this file number AS127. Okay, so if I go here, I can say AS127, and there it is, right? Just like imagine you've created a folder in your computer, and that's where you're chronologically storing all this information. So as soon as you've got this retainer receipt, you can download this to your local machine, or you can pretty much save it or download it into this particular Google Drive account under the folder that's pertaining to that file. And once you do that, you notice when you come back to this matter and hit refresh under documents, that document is available right away to you. So we give you the flexibility to download these documents, store them locally in your own computer if you're a bit anal about where the documents are stored. Of course, the digital repository of the information is still within the system. So if you wanted to reprint that retainer receipt, you lost it, you want to do that, you can come back into the file, hit receipt, do a retainer receipt, and regenerate that document at any time, right? You can do this with the default theme. You can always do that. But if you wanted to store the document, you would store it under Documents. In fact, we can even click on it, and it opens up in your Google Drive account. So it's very flexible, it's very easy, and you always have the physical copy of the digital document under the pretext or context of this file. Okay? All right. I'll pause once again before I move forward with the next steps, which is really docketing, dispersing, invoicing, and trust transfers. Those are 4 important next steps. But so far, what we've done is we've created a client, we've created a matter, and we've given it an area of practice, a title, and we've accepted a retainer of $1,330 and generated a retainer receipt for that same amount that we sent to the client. So let me pause right here to ask if you have any questions. Okay, great question. So editing in uLaw is pretty straightforward. So let's say this is now $1,330. You can always go back here, click on the edit item. Of course, it really depends on when you made a mistake and how it reflects. If you have already moved money from the retainer into general account, then you cannot change it. Then that becomes a ledger correction, the different purpose. But if it's just a very harmless mistake, just a simple mistake, you can always unlock an item. And maybe this is not $1,330, or maybe the check number was wrong. You can always go back and edit that. Right? Or maybe it was the different method of payment. Maybe it was a different bank account. You can always do that. And reapply. The only time we feel where it's harder to do that is, let's say you've accepted the retainer, right? And you've done the trust transfer. So you have consciously done the trust transfer. And then now if you're trying to do something else with the trust money, then we have checks and balances that will not allow you to do that. So let's say you've put in a few dockets, you've done a disbursement, and well, you could still go ahead and reverse the invoice and do all that. So to answer that question, it's never too hard to edit or change. We don't hold you hostage, but it really comes down to where you are in the workflow and the life cycle of a transaction and how you approach the editing changes. Sometimes it could be a simple edit like what I just showed you. Sometimes, depending on the workflow, it may be a little bit more complex to go and change it because it has already touched many points. Hope that answered the question. But at all times, it's possible to change if you made a mistake. All right, so let me go ahead and then move forward to the next step, which is really, let me docket, disperse some expenses for the client, and generate an invoice and do trust transfers. Those 4 important steps to make your money. So in uLaw, the first tab within a matter page is called the matter events, and it has 7 different tabs. We've already acquainted with disbursements retainer. We've got documents. We've got trust in general to enter information. But there's this tab called additional parties. So here you have John, who's the defendant, right? We in uLaw allow you to add parties so that now you can build a connection between the different contacts in your database with context to this file. So let's say I'm going to add John as a defendant. I go choose defendant as my party type. There you go. I choose defendant. We have a huge list. Presuming that I've already stored John's information, I will search for John. There's quite a few Johns in my system. Actually, funny enough, there is no John with the first name, eh? Let me go add that. So you go into contacts. You would add a new contact. Same step, right? But instead of clicking on the client, I'll say I'm adding a defendant. And I'll say, and this is Mr. John. What's Kennedy? And I'll give John an address. Tree Avenue as well. Ottawa. Make that as his home address and mailing address. So some basic information about John Kennedy, who is the defendant. Okay. Now if I go back to the matter, I'm going to click on the matter button. It's a question around, do we really need to use the calendaring and docketing technologies to return on investment with these technologies? Of course, there is a return, a huge return on these technologies. It comes down to how best you maximize the use of it with any technology, right? Without a laptop, you wouldn't probably be able to view this. Do you really need to view this? Probably not. The biggest advantage, and you need to understand what the advantage is and apply it to whether it's meaningful to you or not, is really comes down to the Law Society compliance. There's a there's a bit of a guideline and rules around generating ledgers and journals. If you're comfortable using this manually and doing it manually, by all means, yes, as long as you understand the boundaries and the rules. What uLaw does as a technology is it wraps all of that in the form of docketing and putting all of this in a practice management platform, and maybe I should cut to the chase and get there. Gives you these ledgers and journals at a click of a button where you don't have to worry. It allows you to reconcile your bank accounts. That's an important step. Whether you do it with the technology or not, you're going to spend time on it. Whether you spend 3 hours doing a reconciliation for a month or 15 minutes reconciling that account is what the value of the technology is. You can create court forms. So let's say when you represent a plaintiff, they're going to ask you for a plaintiff's claim form. So it's a form that you download from the Ontario court office, fill in all the information. So you have to type in Adira Smith, his address, you have to type in your information, you got to type in John's information. In a single snapshot, let's say I go and do it once. Next time, let's say there's a change of address for Adira. You got to go change that form. So instead, if let's say I add John, who I just saved. All right, come on now. Let me just go ahead and add Jim Johnson. And I can add another party. I have to get out of this real quick. Let's say defendant, they have a paralegal too, right? So I'll go ahead and say representative of the opponent. Who's the opposing paralegal. And let's say that's Steffi Graf. Oops, sorry. Steffi Jones. I'll add enter information. So now you've built a relationship between John, the defendant, his representative, Steffi, right? Now if you go into uLaw, you have court forms. And this is primarily built for the province of Ontario, for all the legal professionals here. And let me say, go ahead and click court forms. Depending on the style of practice that you focus on, you could have court forms from landlord and tenant, small claims court, POA, HTA, tribunal, accident benefits, family, right? So let's say I do a small claims court, and I'll choose whatever form. So we have updated court forms where you don't have to go to the website to download it. You can choose the plaintiff's claim form or whatever form you like. You can choose the courthouse that you want to go to. Put in the claim number if you have one at that time. Choose the date and hit just download. And what the technology does for you is it takes all that information and it automatically figures out the placeholders where that information needs to be inserted, and it inserts that information right there. If it's a small claims court form, we know it's a Word document. If it's a landlord and tenant board, we know it's a PDF. And we take the information you've already provided us, and bam, you have all that information pre-populated so that you don't have to manually enter it. It's a time saver, right? So you've got all the information, and you can, of course, always add to this. If, let's say, your LSUC number just, of course, it shouldn't change, but let's say you want to append this or make some changes, it's all done. So you've got defendant 1. Imagine you're doing an LATB form. You have 25 defendants. It happens, right? Are you going to be entering all that information, or just have the system do that for you? Here's the defendant 1. If you've got another 24 defendants, uLaw would automatically add it as an additional addendum to this main form, right? Okay. Let me go back to my docketing, because that's really where the crux of the work is. So I can go ahead and put in a docket event that says, I'm going to wrap the entire matter into a single flat rate, so it makes it easier, because I do have, I know I'm running out of time here. So most of our clients, what they do is there's a couple of things. You could have initial client intake. You can put in an hour's time, right? You can just say, I spent 1 hour, and then click Save. Oh. All right, there you go. All right. And I can put in the description, and I can say initial client meeting. This is notes taking, right? So you could definitely use this for taking notes. Initial client meeting, retainer agreement signed, and retainer receipt provided. Maybe that's the 1 hour spent in doing that, and you're charging your client for it. And let's assume you're charging by the hour. This is how you go about it. You'd say, on the specific date of 6th, that's the first work, and your per hour rate is $150. And when you enter save, that's how you're telling the system, hey, uLaw, my friend, this is what happened with regards to this matter. I just did that client intake, because that's how you're going to be making money, because you're generating the invoices from a system. Right away, what we do is we take the 1 hour spent, take your $150. If you're actually going to be charging taxes, then it adds the taxes to it. If you're not going to be adding taxes, you can always edit this, come into the default tax rate, and just make this 0. Right? And you can continue to add events, which are dockets. So by default, it's edit. So let me show you. When I say add new event, anytime anything new is added, you can see the save button right here. So you could say on the 7th, I did a court application, or no, document drafting. You could say court forms. What happens is a lot of our paralegal clients use the automated court form feature, and they can still charge the entire 1 hour or 15, 20 minutes, or round it off to the next 18 minutes, but then use the product to save the time for them. Especially if this is outsourced work. I've seen that happen. So internally too, we as a friend, as your product, I'd love for you to tell us how much time did you actually spend on it. So if you can build that discipline right from day one, many times we've heard, legal professionals burn themselves down. So this is a way for you to be able to really write that story, right? Tell us that you're doing it, because the next, third time you're doing this, as part of our analytics, we tell you that, hey, typically in a small claims matter, you seem to be burning yourself. Your profit is not that great. Maybe you want to re-strategize the way you're billing, right? So you can do this. You can continue to go billable time after billable time, and we're going to just take each and every docket as you put it in and make it available as part of our invoice. So if we go ahead and do an invoice, I'll do a pre-bill. A pre-bill is just a harmless document. It gives you all the numbers for you to see it, but it does not generate an invoice number because it's not ready for the client yet. It's just for your eyes only. But it has all the information, like, here's the client's information, except for the invoice number. It tells you, here's the client intake, $150 per hour, $150, very standard rates. But let's say you're doing a flat rate. It's a running bill too, so it also tells your client, if you plan to send this, there's the retainer to that check of $1,330. Thank you very much for that. Bottom line, it tells them that's the retainer balance interest. Now, this is where technology helps because it's now keeping a tab of those balances. Otherwise, you would have to enter an Excel sheet to keep a tab on those balances, right? Let's say you don't like this. You want to just put everything into one. What our clients do is they basically finish the matter, or they do all this docketing within uLaw. They don't charge for it, right? So you can always change a billable time to a flat rate. I'll make this 0 and then click on Save. So these are dockets. You're still filling it out because you want to be using a system to capture this as and when it happens, but you're not charging for it. And then you put a final docket, which says final closure, and you could say, work completed, SEC filed. Sorry, I'm just making this up. I have no idea. Invoices generated, statement of closure. You can bulletize this. It can really look professional. And now just change the entire docket to a flat rate and charge the $1,000. Okay, so uLaw provides you a lot of flexibility with regards to how best you docket this. It could be a combination of billable time and flat rate. It could just be a flat rate overall, or it could just be billable time. It could be contingency. You could have stop clocks running, right? If you do not know which matter you're working on, we also have other ways that we could just continue to enter a system. We have a tickler system, as they call it. We have that as well. But let me get ahead of myself here. I've added the $1,000, and you can see the running bill here. So it says, as you enter the information, we're telling you that's what you're going to take out. So let me add the disbursements. So I'll go ahead and add the disbursement. I'll say with general, because that's where people mostly do. We recommend that you use the trust account. A lot of people use the general account. So you could say a court fee of $100. Say tax exempt. You could say this is expenses on client accounts and paid this to the Ministry of Finance. And this is the beauty of uLaw product. It's not the top part is for your client to disperse. The bottom part, because we're a full-fledged business accounting software, this is where you come in and tell us how you paid for it. So someone must have paid for it from your business, right? So how did you pay for this? So let's say it came out of my general account and I wrote a check. You can even print that check from uLaw, and that's the $100 that's going away from your business and you're hoping to recover it because there's a retainer in, you're going to reflect it in the invoice and do the trust transfer. Okay? Sorry, I know we're running out of time. How much more time do I have, please? Okay, perfect. So in case of an internet, so what happens is if that's where we have the save button. So anytime you click the save button, that information is saved automatically to the cloud. So after it has saved, like here right now, if the internet goes right now, no worries because we've already saved it. But if it goes at the time of saving, of course, like anything else, if you've drafted, I don't think it quite saves it like a draft, if that's what you mean. You would have to come back and retype it if you lose power. Unless you have clicked the save button, then we automatically save it. So let me go ahead and add one more disbursement. I will say application fee, the same thing. And I'll put this as $100 as well. Or just for fun's sake, let me say $200. Tax exempt. And I'll say Ministry of or Attorney General. Okay. Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I click save. So you've docketed, you've dispersed. Yeah. Now the last step really is to be able to invoice it. So to do that, as we discussed, we hit invoice. Now, pre-bill, of course, you can do a pre-bill, but to actually generate an invoice, you click the complete button. That's the uLaw learning curve. Now you can always mark this invoice as paid because the client has already paid you $1,330 in a retainer. So there's really no payment that you should expect from the client unless the docketing and the disbursements have gone over and above $1,330, right? So in this case, it's under $1,330, so you can actually mark this as paid. You can change the theme of things. And you can even say who this goes to, because we send you a little snippet of the summary of this invoice. You can say when you're charging this, you can backdate invoices too if you're catching up. Right? And you click on the invoice button. And as all documents do, you download it. You click on the download button. I can see the internet is a bit slow here. I already see it in my machine. There you go. You click download. And let's say you upload that invoice into Google Drive. Now you have both the documents. You can even email it, right? This particular invoice, you can just drag and drop it into a Gmail or a Outlook inbox, and it's available. So here's the running bill. We've told your client, typically I would charge $150 for the hour, but I'm not charging you by the hour. It's $1,000, no taxes. And here's the two disbursements of $100 and $200, and $1,330. And the balance left is $30, right? Now what you can do is, once this is done, of course, the last step in the process to make your money is to transfer the money, and the legal lingo for that is called pending trust transfer. Many times people leave that money sitting in trust, which is not good only because you will get audited, and unless you move that into general account, you would not be able to make your revenue for your firm, right? So you'd go ahead, and where I got to is, again, you can always click on the action button, and it's all grouped by where the money goes into. So if it's a withdrawal from trust, you could see it's called Trust Invoice Payment Transfer. And here's the screen. Or the way I like to teach uLaw clients is just click on the question mark. we even give it to you in red, saying, as far as Ulaw goes, we don't know if you've done the transfer, so we're asking you to give us that information. So this is where you open up your TD account, your CIBC, RBC, whoever you bank with. You would do this electronically or walk to the bank and do this in person, and then tell us at Ulaw that you've done it, that you've actually moved the money from trust to general, right? So you could go ahead and select them all, and we keep you trust compliant. That's another beauty of the Ulaw technology, because we safeguard your trust compliance. So you receive $1,330, we're only allowing you to transfer a total amount of $1,300 because that's what you've invoiced. Now you can decide that you only want to transfer the legal fees at this time and leave the 2 disbursements for later. But the actual amount will have to be compliant with whatever number it was invoiced for. So let's say you're moving it from your trust to general, you can write yourself a check, or in the province of Ontario, if let's say you do an electronic fund transfer, which is moving money from one TD account to another TD account just electronically, you are requested to fill out what's called as a Form 9A, and Ulaw automatically populates that for you as well. So all this information is in your settings, and you just click download and drag and drop that into that Google Drive as and when it happens. And that's pretty much it. Now you've got $30 still remaining. You probably want to refund that retainer, so you can write them a check for it. Rarely happens, but I'm just saying if it does happen. Sorry, click the wrong button. So you can say action, refund retainer, and $30, write them a check. Refund of retainer, paid to Adira Smith. Of course, coming out of your trust account, you can print that check, and payments. Done. Right? Now coming to the last point, and I'll stop here because I think I may have taken a bit too much of your time. So you've done all this. You do this on a daily basis. You have to do it somewhere, whether it's a paper and pen, whether it's an Excel sheet, a PC-based software, cloud-based software. It's best to use some system to help you through this process. What we do is we, of course, allow you to do all of that as well. But here is really where the magic recipe comes in. So if you come into Accounts, which is our tab for all of the accounting-related documents, we have this simple tab called Compliance. There's this big component that you must have learned about called Reconciliation. Trust Reconciliation. This is on a periodic basis comparing the book or the transactions that you have entered into your system, comparing it with the transactions that have really occurred in the bank. The bank is the source of truth, because money comes in and leaves the bank. That's when you truly mean it. Whatever you put in your booking system really doesn't mean anything unless you've compared it and you've agreed that it's happened with the bank. And that's what this process is. Because what happens is, if you don't reconcile on a monthly basis, let's say you sent out a check to a client, this refund of $30, and the client has not yet deposited that money into his account, that $30 is reflected to have left your system in your bookkeeping system. But in your real life, till that client deposits that money, that $30 is not going to be reflected as a withdrawal in your bank. So when you reconcile for the month of July, you're going to see the bank is $30 short compared to what you say in your books. And that's what this reconciliation is about. And we give you the flexibility to actually reconcile on a daily basis, leave alone monthly. So you can basically compare transactions. And you would notice, as and when you did the inputs, we've automatically captured those transactions as withdrawals and deposits. It's plain English. So you got $1,300. the retainer, right? So here's the retainer from Adira Smith for $1,330. That came on the 6th, and that's why it's up right there. And then you did a trust transfer for $1,300 because of this invoice that you generated for this file AS127346. And there's another $30 that was the refund of the retainer. So what you do is you check those two items. Maybe the bank would say a different date. You can change that, right? And just go one after the other. If you've got 20 transactions that month, you can go weekly basis. You can go 5 transactions per week. The month is not over yet. We've got a few more weeks, but at this particular stage, you can basically tell us what your numbers are. And instead of a complete reconciliation, uLaw is one of the very few software, in fact, if not the only one, that allows you to do a preview. A preview allows you to capture all the transactions that have occurred for that very small time period, whether it's for that end of day, end of week, whatever it may be. Yes, so question is, can we have free access? Yes, as part of our partnership with educational institutions, once we do sign up that partnership, we are able to create your own accounts in an educational site called EDU, where you can start to play around with it, with the hope that once you graduate, when you're exploring options for a practice management legal accounting system, that you would explore the use of uLaw as one of your options, right? Because you're already familiar and that's everything. But long story short, I'll just leave you with this. If you wanted to generate the trust ledger, you can click the button, click the date range. So let me choose the monthly option. And it's just a click of a button to hit download. I'll start with the reconciliation preview. There you go. You've got exactly the way the Law Society wants it to be done, with the list of your outstanding clients' trust ledger listing. Okay, this is the reconciliation report. And here's the trust ledger for the month of July. All the clients, including our client Adira Smith. Now, you did not generate this document, and this is the power of the technology behind uLaw that does this automatically for you in a compliant manner that's accepted by the Law Society. As long as you reconcile on a monthly basis, this you can generate at the time of the audit too, to be quite honest. Right? It tells you that $1,330 came in through that check, $100 was for the application fee, $1,000 was for the legal fee, and then there was $200 for the other application fee, and here's $30 out, leaving your balance for that client at zero. Whereas for Ian, you've got $1,000 in his balance, and that would have reflected here. There you go, retainer Ian Smithsonian of $1,000. Here's Ian Smithsonian as of 10th of July, that's his balance, right? So it matches the ledger and the reconciliation report. Same thing with general. Oh, thank you. So general is where you made the money into the business account. It's not your personal account. We do that too, but I'm just going to share quickly the monthly general ledger, and I'm going to call it a day, because I may have already put you to sleep. So long story short, as long as you can enter the data, right, we're able to provide you all the documents that you need as a business. So here's your general ledger for Adira Smith. We capture all the transactions. Okay? We do more. We allow you to add expenses. You can do expense book, which is a combination of your general expenses of your business as well as your disbursements. You've got disbursement general and journal, sorry. So if you've got general disbursement, you just entered that disbursement to happen from your general. All of these documents that all tell a story to the auditor are just a click of a button. Of course, I'm passionate about this. I've been doing this for 13 years. And yeah, it's a great product. So here it is, the general. You've got the Dear Smith $200 for application fee, Dear Smith $100 for court fee. And if you look at the general disbursement journal, you don't have to generate this anymore. For a Dear Smith Attorney General, $200, right? For Dear Smith, the court fee, $100. If you are a business that's already into taxes, we calculate that too. If you wanted to do HST reports, click a button. Your monthly HST, quarterly, yearly. We capture both HST paid and received as you transact. Right? Here's all the HST paid, all the HST received, and in a single snapshot, we even tell you how much of money you owe the government or how much the government owes you as returns. So every data entry component has a meaning to it and has a associated document behind the scene. Okay, so of course we do allow you to capture business expenses. Where, you can go in and say action expense, office expenses, and let's say you purchased paper, and let's say you spent $200 on it from Walmart, coming out of your general account, or maybe you're the owner of the business and you paid it from your own pocket. You could submit that too. And we give you the ability to generate your expense, revenue, profit and loss, right? Even your balance sheet. So this is all you have to give your auditor or your accountant at the end of the month. And we give you big data analytics at the end of the day, so you can really make decisions about your business and really look like a large law firm, which has all that data and all the help. So with that, I'll kind of maybe close this out for today. I'm sure you'll have questions, and we're here to help. So here's what the revenue looks like for me for this quarter. I've got 82% coming from recoverable expenses, 9% from small claims, 5% from child custody, and miscellaneous. I can even compare it to the whole year. I can compare month by month. I can do this even on my phone. Okay. All right, so you can clearly see overall this year, you've got small claims at about 12%, whereas just for this quarter, you've got small claims at about less than about $2,000. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, let me stop here. Of course, thank you so much for participating and making this meaningful. Hopefully, it was your time well spent. Please do email us at support@uLawPractice.com at any time. And yes, of course, we would be able to create your own user account so that you can start playing around with it, use it, and get familiar with it. Let me stop this recording, and I can have my staff